Truth be told, I wasn't a fan of the episode when I read it during my 2-hour stream. Plus, I'd swear Taipei is keeping an eye on my channel. I went to bed at 4:13 a.m. today, and at 4:15 a.m. the author dropped the chapter. But virtual paranoia aside, thank you so much for the support my content has been getting lately. Seriously, the views my channel receives make my time on YouTube profitable, and if it's profitable, that means I can keep investing more. In fact, you'll soon see a long video I'm putting out that's going to be very, very well crafted. One where I'll narrate Elsa's life in depth. But let's get back to today's topic. The most recent episode opens the door for many, many interesting plot lines. Plots like Subaru against the entire kingdom, or plots like Subaru discovering which of his allies is truly his ally, or has already been controlled by the enemy. Fortunately, we can deduce a few things based on certain clues left by the game, The Prophecy of the Throne. But before starting and sharing my thoughts, a quick shout out to Ivan, Lucas, Dan He, Joaquin, Matias Salinas, Felipe, Zaxa, Ricardo, Ariel, Joaco, Tuca, and William. Believe me, I'd like to expand a bit on the greetings, but there are too many of you. And while I've considered raising the price for shoutouts, I decided not to because for now, the amount is still manageable. On the side of my English community, a shout out to Sean Miller who just joined. Now let's get started. Welcome to the analysis of Chapter 14 of ReZero Arc 10. Before I begin, I should clarify that while the prophecy of the throne strayed significantly from the original plot in this novel, many of the elements introduced remain canon, like the characters' origins, their powers, and if we want to get picky, their personalities as well. I want you to keep this in mind for when I back up my points in the video. The episode starts where we left off, with Crush revealing her draconic eye, but the most interesting part of this segment is that Subaru claims Crush's eye isn't like those of the ground dragons used for transport. Instead, he puts them on the same level as the characteristics of Volcanica and Mesoira. I must admit, I'm surprised the author was so benevolent with Crush. I mean, given Taipei's apparent dislike for the green-haired girl, I thought he'd give her an eye in the same category as a ground dragon. Don't blame me for thinking that way, but with all the crap that's fallen on the candidate, it's hard not to imagine that pathetic possibility. Then Beiko and Tiga fight Crush, but Crush is simply on a superior level, one where she ends both their attacks before they can even start them. At least that's Subaru's deduction. And while it's a valid one, let's remember it's not the full explanation of the phenomenon. In fact, it seems the theory about her strength I mentioned in my other video, that theory about Crush's new power might still be valid. With this new strength, Crush effortlessly solos Tiga. The poor boy can no longer counterattack as before. Instead, he can barely defend himself, and even his defenses were ineffective because it said he was receiving slashes all along his body. While Crush solos Betty and definitively takes Tiga out of the fight, Subaru takes advantage of the time bought by his friend and uses his whip to neutralize her, but it's not enough. Still, Subaru manages to see Crush's face and claims she looks like she wants to cry. This could also be interesting for a future comment, like if Crush is truly being controlled, it makes sense that a part of her would be crying over the disaster she's causing, possibly against her will. Faced with Crush's counterattack, Betty uses the spell that grants invulnerability while simultaneously using the spell that nullifies magic in the area, which is a feat for someone like her. In this favorable outcome, Subaru proceeds to immobilize Crush. Using his invisible providence, he grabs her wrist and forces her to drop her sword. One thing that made me laugh about this part is that the novel makes it clear they were so close to each other at this moment that they could hear each other's breathing and breath. I imagine the Subaru and Crush shippers will enjoy this. While Subaru was begging Crush to stop, the candidate, or ex-candidate, changes her expression and pins him to the ground, but not to finish him off, rather to save him from a red flare that engulfed everything. Then Subaru loses consciousness. Honestly, the fight choreography up to this point and the way Subaru tries to go toe-to-toe with Crush was really interesting. But the part that caught my attention most was that fireball at the end. Some might think it was Tiga who launched it, but Tiga knows as much about magic as Wilhelm. Have you ever seen Wilhelm use magic? Exactly. He's just a brute force swordsman, not a swordsman with magical potential like Subaru or Julius. So, who was behind the fireball? Coincidentally, the way that Fireball appeared is very similar to how Subaru was attacked once in the game The Prophecy of the Throne. In that game, Subaru and Rem were attacked and hit by a flare of apparently similar proportions. In fact, Subaru burned to death. In the game, everyone thought Salem, a villain from that part, was the one who launched the flame, but it was later revealed that Puka was the one launching it from hiding. The fact that his magical affinity is fire makes that damn squirrel even more suspicious. Plus, this squirrel was a fan of Puck. Imagine being a fan of the biggest fraud in ReZero. Setting aside my slight distaste for the squirrel, I'm aware the game's plot doesn't have to repeat here, but a variable the author has maintained, even though it's a different canon, is the personalities and abilities of the characters introduced. So it's not far-fetched to believe that just as Puka helped Salem from the shadows, he's now interfering in events from the shadows here. I know he hasn't appeared in the main story yet, but I think the reason is precisely that the author wants to mark his appearance as the piece behind the scenes all this time doing these kinds of bad things. And while I'm aware that even his partner Salem hasn't appeared, as I said in another video, we've already seen part of his clothes in an official illustration, that illustration where he fulfills the dream of many of my Latin subscribers and starts spooning Felix while Russell watches because he's into voyeurism. I don't know what kind of nonsense I'm saying. I'm recording this at 1 a.m., so cut me some slack. In short, Puka and Salem might already be making their move off camera. Puka attacking Subaru and Salem going after Felix. Also, this fireball apparently launched by Puka would be what killed Subaru in the last loop and not Crush as we believed. At least that's the conclusion I can reach now, since in the remaining part of the episode, we'll see that Crush doesn't want to kill Subaru. But that's all regarding the first part of the episode. Let's move on to the other part, which I find just as interesting. Hours pass, and Subaru wakes up in the sewers. It's revealed he suffered a burn on his right arm. Unfortunately, Betty can't treat it, so it falls to Crush to heal him a bit with what she can. Something that catches my eye is that Betty apparently knows about tetanus and warns Subaru that he could contract it in the sewers, asking him not to do anything stupid. I say it catches my eye because I didn't expect the isekai world to have that knowledge already. I mean, I'd expect it from Wallachia, Kararagi, or Gusteko, but Lugunica? That nation depends on healing magic for everything. I'm not saying it's implausible. After all, it's known that a branch of medicine exists, a branch recently pushed by Felix, but the whole thing was a surprise. Then Crush analyzes the surroundings and says they are fleeing through the sewers that connect the Noble District, the district where Russell, Reinhardt's family, and Crush live. And these sewers are connected to the Merchant District, the place where the god of ReZero resides, the great Lord Katamon. You know, the one who 400 years ago commissioned his errand boy Flugel with some sins? No, just kidding, but you get me. Not ironically. I hope they bring Katamon into this part of the story since he was a recurring character in the Prophecy of the Throne. Returning to the topic, Crush tells Subaru the reasons she started this rebellion. She says she has strong reasons to believe Miklatov and his men were traitors to the kingdom, and according to her, he was manipulating information, which is why she reacted this way. She finds it illogical to believe that the stone prophesying the kingdom's events wouldn't have prophesied something like the disease that would ravage the royal family. So who's right? Crush with her assumption that Miklatov hid the information about the stone, or Miklatov saying that the stone never actually prophesied the royal family's demise? Surprisingly, answering this is harder than I thought, but let's take it piece by piece. For an answer that compiles all the information regarding the Dragonstone, we have to recap the info from the novels that talk about Leip Bariel, Priscilla's late husband, and Wilhelm's former boss. Something that feels very, very strange now that I think about it in retrospect is that the Lugunica royal family would have entrusted the care of the dragon tablet to Leip. You see, Leip was a total idiot who fell into well-deserved disgrace due to the events of the war narrated in EX2, and he became a sort of pariah. Even so, it surprises me that the royal family would entrust him decades later with the care of the Prophecy Stone. It's because he sees the stone that he discovers there will be a royal selection and locates Priscilla to use her. But he also discovers from the tablet that there will be a disease that will kill the family. Honestly, I don't see much of a problem with the fact that Leip didn't warn the others, because Leip was a resentful person seeking to usurp the throne, and it suited him if others didn't know what he knew. In the side novels, we see a bit of how he executes his plans, but it wasn't until Arc 8, that arc nobody reads because everyone skipped from Arc 6 to Arc 9, that it's mentioned Leip read in the prophecy that the royal family would perish. So Crush was right. The stone prophesied the fall of the royal family. But Miklatov said nothing and did nothing. This is why I find it logical that as soon as Crush realized this, she went and executed him for treason. Honestly, I have no idea what explanation there could be for Miklatov keeping quiet, unless it's later revealed that he was actually already under Capella's control for a couple of years, meaning he was controlled by Melty's power, which is why he avoided revealing the full prophecy. But that seems very far-fetched to me, so I don't believe it. Even though they already killed him, it's possible that in the future, as someone mentioned in my comments section, Felix might revive him so he can give his reasons. Before I change the subject, I'd like to share some ideas I have regarding the future of the plot. The recent episodes suggest that the entire kingdom, even those not living in the capital, professed blind faith in the dragon prophecy. And this strangeness is starting to be noticed by everyone thanks to Subaru's dialogues, who, not being from the kingdom or this world, questioned why they believe in the Dragonstone's prophecy as if it were an absolute truth. There's no official confirmation on how Crush also snapped out of the trance and questioned Miklotov, but I imagine that being in contact with the dragon's blood and Filore's power pulled her out of it. Most interestingly, Roswaal also knew about the Dragonstone prophecy, but not because he read it. It was because his gospel told him. In a novel I narrated about Amelia as a maid, that's revealed, and I'd invite you to watch the short if you want more context. But why am I telling you all this? Because I feel Crush might not be the only one who already suspects the omission of information from the Dragonstone. Another person could be Russell, due to the events in a side novel. It goes like this.
It happened at the exact same time that Amelia was separated from her maid, Frederica, in the royal capital and, after wandering through its streets, was rescued by the sword saint, Reinhard. In the capital's commercial district, inside a gloomy-looking tavern that the Mathers house had secretly owned since time immemorial, Russell Fellow expressed his astonishment at his companion's conduct. He candidly confessed to Roswaal that, while he had always considered him an eccentric and peculiar man, he hadn't expected him to turn out to be a madman of such caliber. At that assessment, the Margrave, laughing and tilting his glass, jovially replied that for Russell to say such a thing after knowing each other for over 10 years was a sign that he wasn't finished just yet. Russell, however, incredulously questioned how it was possible for Roswaal to reach such a twisted conclusion from his criticism. Roswaal pointed out that, given Russell was a man who prepared himself thoroughly in every imaginable direction, the fact that he could exceed his expectations was a rather remarkable achievement. Russell managed a faint, bitter smile as he looked around the deserted tavern, a place Roswaal tended to empty at his whim whenever the occasion required it. Tilting his glass, Roswaal inquired with a hint of mischief if his companion had truly shown up without an escort for this meeting. Shrugging his shoulders, Russell dismissed the feint as unnecessary and asked that, after so much prior vetting in other places, he be allowed to shed his professional stiffness while sharing a drink with a friend. Roswaal took the point in stride, though inwardly he suspected Russell had likely brought several subordinates along. It was precisely that cautious side of his friend that he liked. After clinking glasses in a silent toast that served as a truce against the world of intrigue they both inhabited, Russell got straight to the point and questioned him about his true intentions. Faced with Roswaal's playful evasion, Russell urged him not to resort to mindless games, clarifying that he was referring specifically to the new candidate for the royal selection he had personally put forward, the young half-elf. Roswaal narrowed his eyes in good humor, appreciating that nothing escaped his companion's notice, for despite having brought Amelia to the capital in secret, Russell already knew her background. The representative of the Merchants Guild expressed his surprise at this sudden interest in the royal selection, noting that the Margrave had never shown any intention of getting so deeply involved in the kingdom's politics until now. Roswaal tried to justify his stance by suggesting that, as long as the government was stable, he could look after his own territory, but Russell countered by suggesting that Roswaal had obtained results too quickly for it to be a coincidence. Shifting his position on his stool, Russell confronted Roswaal with a grave suspicion, hinting that the Margrave had prior knowledge of the royal family's imminent extinction. Roswaal responded with a heavy silence, aware that, if true, such an accusation would represent an unforgivable betrayal that would end their friendship. The Margrave then asked, in an inquisitive tone, if Russell truly believed he had secured a candidate in advance to rule the kingdom from the shadows. Russell admitted that, from a broad perspective, that would be the most convincing plot, but he sighed deeply and eased the tension by pointing out that the theory became inconsistent when considering that the one put forward was a half-elf. He argued that, given the deep-seated hatred and fear toward the Witch of Envy, it was impossible for a young woman with her characteristics to ascend to the throne, making Roswaal's plan a foolish act. Roswaal acknowledged that the situation was, indeed, incomprehensible, to which Russell replied that he would appreciate it if he didn't talk as if it were someone else's business, given that he was the cause of such confusion. The Margrave then used a metaphor, suggesting that in Russell's eyes, he was nothing more than a player who had shown a miserable hand with no chance of winning. Russell was even harsher, snapping that rather than a player, he looked like a clown, something his own makeup bore out. Roswaal nodded magnanimously at the sharp comment and cryptically suggested that the world was always more moved by the story of the underdog crawling up from the bottom. Finally, Roswaal raised a finger and asked Russell for a special favor. Although the merchant warned him that the guild would maintain an impartial stance and that he should not expect favoritism, Roswaal assured him that he respected that neutrality. His request, in fact, was for Russell to discreetly spread the rumor that the new candidate was a half-elf with silver hair and amethyst eyes. Seeing Russell's distrust, Roswaal clarified that he didn't want the rumor to reach the common folk, but rather to be caught by the sharpest ears. He confessed his goal wasn't complicated, he just wanted someone specific to hear the rumor and approach the castle so that things could move forward. Russell, draining the liquor from his glass in a single gulp and letting out a long sigh, admitted once more how difficult it was to understand his friend. Despite his constant doubts and countless opportunities to sever ties, the merchant remained there, a gesture Roswaal deeply valued, generously refilling Russell's empty glass for the next round.
Due to the revelation that Roswaal already knew what was going to happen, I like to believe that perhaps Russell has snapped out of the do not question the prophecy stone trance, and that's why in the middle of Arc 9, he's already made his moves. He sought to take control of Felix, perhaps to revive Lipe and ask him if the prophecy he read said the same thing Miklatov said. Unfortunately, I feel this is very far-fetched since the easiest thing would be to just ask Miklatov to let him see the stone. Even so, I want to and would like to believe that Russell's involvement in the main story has to do with the revelation Roswaal made to him in that side story. But to wrap up this video, let's talk about Subaru's future. Truthfully, I highly doubt Tiga betrayed Subaru. In the games, Tiga is someone who, while forced to help the bad guys, actually ensured at all times that he didn't harm an innocent person, and the one committing the questionable acts was Sakura. So, following my belief that personalities and powers are maintained, Sakura was the one who, while Subaru was unconscious, informed the soldiers about the possible joint treason by Subaru and Crush. And if you're wondering how the news traveled so fast, it's likely because Filore's faction already has moles in key positions within the kingdom. In fact, in the game The Prophecy of the Throne, it's said that when the protagonists managed to lift Melty's control over the kingdom, screams and feints were heard throughout the capital. Meaning Melty had a large number of people under her control who supported her, and these people reacted that way upon being freed from the spell. So it's not crazy to believe she already has several under her control at this point. In fact, I remember at one point in the game, the Apple Lord had to get into a bare-knuckle brawl with the entire block because they had been victims of mind control, and he only lost because he saved a child. Personally, someone I'd like to see revealed as being under the control of this power is Rickett Hoffman. His son Rachens was already somewhat active in Arc 9, and the author had already shown a stance of giving him the spotlight soon, even planning to give him a named episode. And now that we're in the arc of the royal family, a family he was very close to, well, it's about time. Finally, now that Sirius has been mentioned recently, I'd like to think she'll be key at a certain point in this arc. This is because if there are many people influenced by control power, she could serve as a sort of Wi-Fi network that breaks the enemy's connection in favor of, or against, the protagonists. Remember that what makes this Arc 10 interesting is the possible future where Subaru won't know which of his allies are genuinely supporting him or which are being controlled. So I see a use for Sirius as possible. More so now that in her novels, it seems she wants to imitate Liliana's singing to incorporate it into her manipulation technique. But anyway, I feel I've said a lot of crazy things today, but I think these videos are for that, to talk about the possibilities raised by following the series weekly. Possibilities that have at least a minimum of foundation, of course. And if that entertained you, I'm glad.